See, the truth is, we live in a sex-crazed world where if you live with sexual purity, it is going to require a lot of effort. And any realistic person in our day is going to ask, is it really worth it? I mean, what's the payoff? So let's look at a few of the payoffs of honoring God with our sexuality. The first one is, if you choose to honor God with your sexuality, you will see the development of self-control in your life. I mean, learning to manage sexual desire with honesty and strength is one of the greatest challenges of human existence. It is not an easy thing to do at all. But there's an enormous gain in self-esteem and character and integrity when a person is able to say, I handled decisions about sexuality in a way that did not damage myself or others and was honoring to God. You gain confidence in your ability to stick to your values and to make wise decisions in all areas of your life when you do that. One of the things that you gain when you honor God with your sexuality is you gain the characteristic of self-control. You grow in self-control. And you might know that self-control is one of the 9 fruits of the Spirit that Paul the Apostle talks about in Galatians 5, verses 22 and 23. A second payoff of staying sexually pure is if you choose to honor God with your sexuality, and if you do get married in the future, you will have much greater freedom in that relationship and a lot less baggage. The Bible teaches that physical intimacy between two people should only increase where commitment increases. It should happen within biblical boundaries. And the Bible says that when sexual activity gets ahead of the commitment that two people make to each other, there's going to be trouble. See, if that happens, there's going to be damage to your conscience. There's going to be damage to your relationship with that person. That relationship will have an unholy foundation. In fact, husbands, if you engaged in premarital sex with your now wife, you need to ask her to forgive you for that. And wives, you need to ask your husbands to forgive you for that as well. Because that relationship started with an unholy foundation. And you need to forgive one another for that, because both of you, whether you know it consciously or not, you're struggling deep down with guilt over doing that. See, people who engage in premarital sex are going to experience damage to their spiritual lives. There will be a splintering of your soul. Why? Because the Bible says that when you have sex with another person, the two of you are now becoming one flesh. See, it's not just two bodies coming together. It's a soul connection. But, I know what happens is that couples begin to rationalize. They say, well, we're not married yet, but we're going to get married. We're in love with each other. We're really committed to each other. We're going to get married. And then they just rationalize almost any kind of physical intimacy between the two of them. Well, you need to know that the Bible is very clear about this. There's something about the act of a public, permanent, complete commitment that takes place in the marriage covenant that makes that relationship a safe place for the ultimate expression of physical intimacy. And the Bible says that outside of that relationship, physical intimacy at that level is completely off limits. Completely off limits. So, what are the benefits of honoring God with your sexuality? You will develop self-control in your life. You will have greater freedom and less baggage if you do get married in the future. And a third benefit of honoring God with your sexuality is you will have a clear conscience. I mean, there are few forms of guilt more powerful than sexual guilt. Few forms. You will have guilt over that if you get involved in sex outside of marriage. You will end up feeling guilty. And millions and millions and millions of people are struggling with that kind of guilt right now, even millions of Christians. And that's the kind of guilt that ruins a person's relationship with God. You know, Psalm 66:18 says, if I regard iniquity, sin, in my heart, the Lord will not hear me. I know that. I know that when I have sin, unconfessed sin in my life to God, I know that God is not going to hear my prayers. Therefore, I don't have a clear conscience, and it ruins my relationship with God the Father. A fourth benefit of pursuing sexual purity and honoring God with your sexuality is if you get married in the future, your odds of having a successful marriage increase greatly. Did you know that? You know, a lot of people today claim that a couple needs to live together first or be sexually active before marriage in order to find out if they're sexually compatible with one another or not. But you need to know the research on this is very clear. A researcher named Roger Hillerstrom, he did a study and discovered this, that if a couple lives together before they get married, then before their 5th anniversary, they have a 35% chance that they will be divorced. Before their 5th anniversary, 35% chance if they were sexually active or lived together before marriage. And yet, if a couple doesn't live together before marriage, there's only a 19% chance of divorce before the 5th anniversary. The odds of divorce almost double when a couple lives together before marriage. Psychologist David Myers, he noted 7 separate studies that have been done in recent years. And every one of them points to the same finding. People who cohabit with their spouse-to-be have a much higher divorce rate than those who don't. See, the research is just bearing out what the Bible says. I had you turn earlier to 1 Samuel 2, verse 30. God says, those who honor me, I will honor. But those who despise me, God says, will be lightly esteemed. If you honor God's value, that sexual intimacy is to be reserved for marriage, there are enormous benefits to your life.